the bullet that shattered the window of the general store in Kelton, Utah, missed Delilah Newsome's head by 3 inches, and instead of screaming like any sensible woman in 1878 might have done, she grabbed the nearest can of peaches and hurled it straight back through the broken glass at the drunk cowhand who had fired his pistol into the air moments before. "You ignorant fool!" she shouted, storming toward the door with her dark hair coming loose from its pins and her green eyes blazing with fury. "That window costs money, and old Mr. Henderson does not deserve to lose his livelihood because you cannot hold your liquor." The cowhand, a scraggly fellow with tobacco-stained teeth, looked startled by this whirlwind of feminine rage bearing down on him. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own boots, while his companions howled with laughter at his predicament. Before Delilah could reach him and presumably do him bodily harm, a tall figure stepped between them. "Easy there, miss," the stranger said, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that made men listen. He was broad-shouldered and sun-bronzed, with sandy hair and blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he looked at her. "Why don't you let me handle this situation? And who might you be to tell me what to do?" Delilah demanded, planting her hands on her hips. She stood 5 feet and 7 inches tall, which was considerable for a woman, but this cowboy still had several inches on her. "Name's Travis Weston, madam. Just rode into town this morning looking for work at one of the cattle ranches hereabouts." He tipped his hat to her, and she noticed his hands were calloused but clean, his clothes dusty from travel but well-maintained. "And I figure a lady such as yourself should not have to dirty her hands with the likes of him." "I am perfectly capable of handling my own affairs, Mr. Weston," Delilah said sharply, but she took a step back nonetheless. There was something about the way he had positioned himself, protective but not condescending, that kept her from pushing past him. Travis turned to the drunk cowhand and his friends. "I suggest you boys apologize to the lady and to Mr. Henderson, and then you contribute whatever money you have in your pockets toward fixing that window. Otherwise, I will be happy to escort you to the sheriff myself." The authority in his voice brooked no argument. The drunk cowhand mumbled something that might have been an apology and pulled a few crumpled bills from his vest pocket, dropping them on the ground before stumbling away with his companions. Travis picked up the money, dusted it off, and walked past Delilah into the general store. She followed him inside, curiosity overriding her irritation. Mr. Henderson, a kindly older gentleman with white whiskers, was sweeping up broken glass with shaking hands. "Here you are, sir," Travis said, handing him the bills. "It is not much, but it should cover at least part of the damage. I will see if I can find someone to repair the window properly this afternoon." "Thank you, young man," Mr. Henderson said gratefully. "And thank you too, Miss Newsome. Your father raised a daughter who does not frighten easily." "My father raised a daughter who cannot keep her mouth shut, according to my mother," Delilah said dryly. She picked up the broom from Mr. Henderson's hands. "Let me finish cleaning this up. You should sit down before you cut yourself on the glass." As she swept, she was acutely aware of Travis Weston watching her. When she glanced up, she caught him studying her with an expression she could not quite read. It was not the usual look men gave her, which ranged from exasperation to outright disapproval. There was something different in his gaze, something that made her skin feel warm. "You are staring, Mr. Weston," she said pointedly. "Forgive me, Miss Newsome," he replied, but he did not look away. "It is just that I have never seen a woman throw a can of peaches at an armed man before." "It was a can of peaches," she said, "not exactly a weapon of war." "Maybe not, but it showed spirit." A slow grin spread across his face, transforming his serious features into something dangerously handsome. "I admire a woman with fire." Delilah felt her cheeks flush, and she bent her head quickly to hide her reaction. She was 22 years old and had heard plenty of compliments before, but none that had ever made her feel quite so flustered. Most men in Kelton found her outspoken nature off-putting. Her own mother despaired of ever finding her a suitable husband. Delilah is too stubborn to wed, her mother had announced just last week at Sunday dinner in front of the entire family. No man wants a wife who argues with him at every turn and thinks she knows better than everyone else. Her younger sister, Margaret, who was as sweet and biddable as Delilah was difficult, had tried to defend her. "Delilah just has strong opinions, mother. There is nothing wrong with that." But their mother had shaken her head sadly. "Mark my words, she will end up a spinster if she does not learn to hold her tongue." Delilah had not argued, though she wanted to. She loved her family, but they did not understand her. They did not understand that she could not simply pretend to be someone she was not, just to attract a husband. If a man could not accept her as she was, outspoken and independent, then she had no interest in him anyway. "Miss Newsome," Travis's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly fine," she said, dumping the broken glass into the waste bin with more force than necessary. "Just thinking about family matters." "Ah," he nodded knowingly. "I have 4 sisters myself, so I understand family can be complicated." "4 sisters?" Delilah raised an eyebrow. "And you still admire women with fire? I would think you would run in the opposite direction." Travis laughed, a warm sound that filled the store. "My sisters taught me that the strongest women are the ones worth knowing. They do not let the world tell them who they should be." Delilah found herself smiling despite herself. "Your sisters sound like interesting people." "They are. 2 of them are married now, running their own households and managing their husbands quite expertly. The other 2 are still at home in Montana, driving my father to distraction with their various schemes." His expression grew wistful. "I miss them, truth be told." "What brings you to Utah then?" Delilah asked. She told herself it was simply polite conversation, but she was genuinely curious about this stranger who had stepped between her and danger without hesitation. "Looking for work, like I said. I have been drifting for a while now, taking jobs where I can find them. Heard there might be opportunities at some of the ranches around here." He shrugged. "I am a decent hand with cattle, good with horses, and I know my way around a ranch." "The Morrison Ranch is hiring," Mr. Henderson interjected from where he sat behind the counter. Old Samuel Morrison could use some reliable help. His sons moved to California last year to try their hand at prospecting, and he has been struggling to manage the place on his own. "That sounds promising," Travis said. "Where might I find this ranch?" "About 5 miles north of town," Delilah said. "Follow the main road until you see the split oak tree, then take the western fork. You cannot miss it." Travis tipped his hat to her again. "I appreciate the information, Miss Newsome. Perhaps I will see you around town once I get settled." "Perhaps," Delilah said noncommittally, but she watched through the broken window as he mounted a fine-looking chestnut gelding and rode north out of town. There was something about Travis Weston that intrigued her, something she could not quite name. "He seems like a good man," Mr. Henderson said, following her gaze. "Stood up for what was right without making a big fuss about it. That is rare these days." "I suppose," Delilah said, forcing herself to look away. "I should get home. Mother will be wondering where I am." She walked the 3 blocks to her family's house, a neat white structure with a front porch and window boxes that her mother kept filled with flowers. Her father, Daniel Newsome, owned the feed and supply store in town, which provided them with a comfortable living. They were not wealthy, but they wanted for nothing. Her mother, Catherine, was in the kitchen when Delilah arrived, rolling out dough for an apple pie. She looked up with a frown. "You are late. I sent you to get sugar an hour ago. There was an incident at the general store, Delilah explained. Someone shot out Mr. Henderson's window. Catherine's hands stilled. Good heavens! Are you all right? I am fine, Mother. A cowboy helped resolve the situation. Delilah set the sugar on the counter, deliberately not mentioning that she had thrown a can of peaches at the offender or that the helpful cowboy had eyes the color of a summer sky. Well, thank goodness for that. Catherine resumed rolling the dough. Your father wants to speak with you when he gets home tonight. He has something important to discuss. Delilah felt a familiar sense of dread. What about? That is for him to tell you. Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line, which usually meant Delilah was not going to like whatever was coming. That evening, after a quiet dinner where Margaret chattered about the new dress she was sewing and their younger brother Thomas complained about his schoolwork, Daniel asked Delilah to join him in his study. It was a small room lined with books and papers, smelling of pipe tobacco and leather. Sit down, daughter, Daniel said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. He was a solid man with graying hair and kind eyes, and Delilah had always felt he understood her better than her mother did. Mother said you wanted to speak with me, Delilah said, settling into the chair with an apprehensive feeling in her stomach. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. Delilah, you know your mother and I love you very much. We want what is best for you. Of course, Father. But you must understand that we worry about your future. You are 22 now, and you have refused every suitor who has expressed interest in you. He held up a hand when she opened her mouth to protest. I know you have your reasons. Some of those men were not worthy of you, I will grant that. But you cannot keep rejecting every possibility that comes along. I am not rejecting every possibility, Delilah said defensively. I am simply waiting for someone who sees me as more than a housekeeper and bearer of children. I want a partner, Father. Someone who respects my mind as well as my ability to cook and sew. I understand that, I truly do, but there is something else we need to discuss. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. Richard Jennings has asked for permission to court you. Delilah's blood ran cold. Richard Jennings was the son of the wealthiest family in Kelton, owner of the largest cattle operation in the territory. He was also 38 years old, twice divorced, and known for his volatile temper and excessive drinking. No, she said flatly. Absolutely not. Delilah, hear me out. There is nothing to hear out, Father. Richard Jennings is a mean-spirited drunk who has driven away 2 wives already. I will not be the third. He has promised to reform, Daniel said, though he did not sound convinced himself. He says he wants to settle down with a proper wife and start fresh. And you believe him? Delilah stood up, her hands clenched at her sides. Father, I love and respect you, but I cannot believe you would even consider this. You know what kind of man he is. You have seen how he treats his workers, how he speaks to people he considers beneath him. I would rather die a spinster than tie myself to someone like that. Daniel rubbed his temples wearily. I told your mother you would react this way. And I told Richard Jennings that I could not force you to accept his suit if you did not wish it. But Delilah, you must understand the position this puts us in. The Jennings family has influence in this town. Richard could make things difficult for our business if he feels slighted. So you want me to sacrifice my happiness and safety to protect the feed store? Delilah felt tears of anger and betrayal stinging her eyes. No, daughter, that is not what I am saying at all. Daniel stood and came around the desk, placing his hands on her shoulders. I would never force you to marry someone you did not want, but I need you to be realistic about your prospects. Men like Richard Jennings are not going to simply go away because you reject them. He is accustomed to getting what he wants. A chill ran down Delilah's spine. Are you saying he might try to force the issue? I am saying you should be careful. Stay close to home for a while. Do not go anywhere alone. Daniel's expression was grave. I will do everything in my power to protect you, but the Jennings family has resources we do not. That night, Delilah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had always known her outspoken nature would cause problems eventually, but she had never imagined it would put her family in danger. Richard Jennings was not a man who took rejection well. His first wife had fled back east under mysterious circumstances, and the second had died in what was officially called a riding accident, though there were whispers in town that told a different story. The thought of being tied to such a man made her feel physically ill. But the thought of her family suffering because of her stubbornness was equally unbearable. She felt trapped, caught between impossible choices. The next few days passed in uneasy tension. Delilah stayed close to home as her father had advised, helping her mother with household chores and trying not to think about Richard Jennings or his inevitable response to her rejection. Margaret noticed her distraction and tried to cheer her up with gossip and jokes, but Delilah could not shake the feeling that something dark was looming on the horizon. On Saturday morning, she was in the garden picking tomatoes when she heard a horse approaching. Looking up, she saw Travis Weston riding up the path to their house. He had cleaned up since she last saw him, his clothes freshly laundered and his hair still damp as though he had bathed recently. "Miss Newsome," he called out, dismounting with easy grace. "I hope I am not intruding." "Mr. Weston," Delilah said, surprised and inexplicably pleased to see him. "What brings you here?" "I took your advice and found work at the Morrison Ranch. Samuel Morrison is a good man, and he has been telling me about the town and the people in it." Travis approached the fence that separated the garden from the yard. "He mentioned that your father owns the feed and supply store, and since I need to purchase some items for the ranch, I thought I would stop by. But then I saw you out here and wanted to say hello." "That was kind of you," Delilah said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The store is in town, though. Did you get lost?" "Not exactly. I may have asked someone where the Newsome family lived," Travis admitted with that disarming grin. "I was hoping to see you again, if I am being honest." Delilah felt her heart skip a beat. "Why would you want to see me? We barely know each other." "True enough. But I have not been able to stop thinking about that woman who threw a can of peaches at an armed man and then proceeded to lecture him about the cost of window glass." Travis leaned against the fence, his blue eyes warm with amusement. "You are not like anyone I have ever met, Miss Newsome." "Most people find that to be a fault," Delilah said, trying to sound casual even as her pulse quickened. "Then most people are fools." Travis's expression grew serious. "In my experience, the world tries hard to make people conform to what it expects of them. Those who resist that pressure, who insist on being themselves despite the consequences, are the ones who make life interesting." Delilah studied him carefully. "You sound like someone who speaks from experience." "My father wanted me to take over the family ranch in Montana. It is a good spread, profitable, everything a man could want. But it was not what I wanted. I needed to see the world beyond those same mountains and valleys. My father thought I was being foolish and ungrateful. We parted on difficult terms." Travis looked down at his hands. "I regret that, but I do not regret choosing my own path." "That must have been hard," Delilah said softly. "It was, but it was also necessary." He looked back up at her. "I am guessing you understand something about that, about having to be true to yourself even when it disappoints the people you love." "More than you know," Delilah admitted. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she told him about Richard Jennings and her father's concerns. She did not know why she was confiding in this relative stranger, except that something about Travis made her feel safe, understood. When she finished, Travis's expression had darkened considerably. "I have heard of Richard Jennings. Samuel Morrison has nothing good to say about him. Says he mistreats his workers and his animals, and that is never a sign of good character. My father is worried about what Jennings might do if I continue to refuse him," Delilah said. "But I cannot marry that man, Travis. I simply cannot." It was the first time she had used his given name, and something shifted between them at the sound of it. Travis reached across the fence and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You should not have to," he said quietly. "No woman should be forced into a marriage she does not want. That is wrong, no matter what kind of influence a man has. Wrong and reality are often two different things in the West," Delilah said bitterly. "Maybe so, but that does not mean we should not fight for what is right." Travis squeezed her hand. "If you need help, Delilah, if Jennings tries anything, you send word to the Morrison Ranch. I will come." "You barely know me," she whispered. "Why would you put yourself at risk for a stranger?" "Because you are not a stranger anymore. Because the first moment I saw you, standing there with fire in your eyes and peaches in your hand, I knew you were someone special." Travis smiled, though his eyes remained serious. "And because it is the right thing to do." Before Delilah could respond, the front door opened and Catherine stepped out onto the porch. "Delilah, who are you talking to?" Travis released her hand and stepped back, tipping his hat politely. "Good morning, madam. Travis Weston. I work at the Morrison Ranch and was just making the acquaintance of your daughter." Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in the scene. "I see. Well, Mr. Weston, we are about to sit down to lunch. Would you care to join us?" It was clearly not a genuine invitation, more of a test to see what this stranger's intentions were, but Travis accepted graciously. "That is very kind of you, madam. I would be honored." Lunch was an awkward affair. Catherine peppered Travis with questions about his background, his family, and his prospects, while Daniel observed quietly, and Margaret made friendly conversation. Thomas, who was 14 and fascinated by anything related to cowboys and ranching, asked Travis endless questions about cattle drives and horse breaking. Travis answered everything with patient good humor, never once seeming put off by the interrogation. He spoke respectfully to Catherine, honestly to Daniel, and kindly to the younger children. Delilah found herself watching him, noting the way his hands moved when he talked, the genuine warmth in his smile, the intelligence in his eyes. "So you plan to stay in Kelton, then?" Daniel asked as Catherine served apple pie for dessert. "For the foreseeable future, sir. Samuel Morrison has offered me steady work, and I like what I have seen of the town so far." Travis glanced at Delilah. "It seems like the kind of place where a man could put down roots if he had a reason to." Catherine caught the look between them and her lips tightened. After Travis left, thanking them graciously for the meal and promising to stop by the feed store the following week, she turned to Delilah with crossed arms. "That young man is interested in you," she said flatly. "He is kind and respectful, mother, that is all. He is a drifter with no prospects beyond day wages at someone else's ranch," Catherine continued. "You could do much better." "Better," Delilah's temper flared, "like Richard Jennings. A man old enough to be my father who has buried 2 wives under suspicious circumstances." "Richard Jennings has money and status," Catherine said. "Travis Weston has nothing but a horse and whatever belongings he can carry in his saddlebags. He has character and kindness, which is more than I can say for Richard Jennings." Delilah stood up from the table. "If you will excuse me, I have chores to attend to." She fled to her room, her emotions churning. Her mother's words stung because they reflected what society valued. wealth and status over decency and genuine feeling. But Delilah knew in her heart that she would rather have an honest man who respected her than all the money in the world. Over the next 2 weeks, Travis found reasons to come into town frequently. He needed supplies for the ranch. He wanted to ask Daniel's advice about feed for the cattle. He happened to be passing by when Delilah was walking to the general store. Each time they met, they talked a little longer, shared a little more about themselves. Delilah learned that Travis was 26 years old, that his favorite food was his mother's apple dumplings, that he could play the harmonica and had a singing voice that made her heart ache. Travis learned that Delilah had taught herself to read Latin from her father's old books, that she dreamed of traveling east to see the ocean, that she made the best biscuits in 3 counties according to Mr. Henderson. They were falling in love, though neither of them said it out loud yet. It was there in the way Travis's eyes lit up when he saw her, in the way Delilah found herself thinking about him during the long hours of household work, in the comfortable silences that fell between them and the laughter that came so easily. But their growing attachment did not go unnoticed. Richard Jennings had not forgotten Delilah's rejection, and when he saw her walking with Travis one afternoon, talking and laughing together, his expression turned ugly. The next day, Daniel came home from the store looking troubled. "Jennings came by today," he told Delilah and Catherine over dinner. "He asked about Travis Weston, wanted to know what the Cowboy's business was with our family." "What did you tell him?" Delilah asked, her stomach knotting with anxiety. "I told him that Mr. Weston was a customer and a respectable young man who had been kind enough to help you when there was trouble at the general store. Nothing more." Daniel pushed his food around his plate, but Jennings made some veiled threats. Said it would be a shame if something happened to young Morrison's ranch, if their cattle got out or their fences got cut. He is trying to intimidate us. "He cannot do this," Delilah said, her voice shaking with anger. "He cannot threaten people just because I will not marry him." "Men like Richard Jennings think they can do whatever they want," Daniel said quietly. "And unfortunately, they are often right. He has money enough to hire men who will do his dirty work, and the sheriff is in his pocket." "Then what do we do?" Margaret asked, looking frightened. "We be careful. We watch our backs, and we hope that Jennings eventually loses interest and moves on to some other poor woman." Daniel looked at Delilah. "I know you have feelings for Travis Weston. It is written all over your face whenever his name is mentioned. But you need to be aware that pursuing that relationship could put him in danger." The thought made Delilah feel sick. "I will not let Richard Jennings dictate my life or hurt people I care about." "I am not sure you have much choice, daughter, not unless you want to see people get hurt." That night, Delilah barely slept. She kept thinking about Travis, about the way he made her feel alive and understood and valued. She thought about Richard Jennings and the dark threat he represented. And she thought about her own stubborn nature, which had brought her to this impossible situation. By morning, she had made a decision. She would end things with Travis before they went any further. It would hurt, but it was better than seeing him injured or worse because of her. She would find a way to handle Richard Jennings on her own terms, without dragging innocent people into the conflict. She was preparing to ride out to the Morrison ranch when Travis appeared at their door. He looked serious, almost grim, and Delilah's heart sank. Had Jennings already made good on his threats? "I need to speak with you," Travis said without preamble. "Privately, if that is all right." They walked to the garden, out of earshot of the house. Travis took her hands in his, and she could feel the tension in his body. "I heard what Richard Jennings said to your father," he began. "Samuel Morrison heard it from someone in town and told me this morning." "Travis, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I know what you are going to say. You are going to tell me that we should stop seeing each other, that it is too dangerous, that you do not want me to get hurt because of you. Am I right? Delilah nodded, tears pricking her eyes. Well, I am not accepting that, Travis said firmly. I am not going to let a bully like Richard Jennings dictate how I live my life or who I care about. And Delilah, I do care about you, more than I have ever cared about anyone. But he could hurt you, Delilah whispered. He has the money and the power to do terrible things, and I could not bear it if something happened to you because of me. Nothing is going to happen to me. I can take care of myself, and so can Samuel Morrison. His ranch is well protected, and he has dealt with men like Jennings before. Travis cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. I am not afraid of him. What I am afraid of is losing you before I have had the chance to really know you, to see where this could go between us. Travis, Delilah breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and searching and full of promise. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and longing into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I am falling in love with you, Travis said simply. I think I have been since the moment I saw you throw that can of peaches, and I am not going to apologize for it or hide it or let anyone scare me away from it. I am falling in love with you too, Delilah admitted, but I am so afraid. Not for myself, but for you, for my family, for everyone who could get caught in the crossfire of Jennings' anger. Then we will face it together, Travis said. You do not have to carry this burden alone anymore, Delilah. That is what it means to love someone, to stand beside them when things get difficult. They held each other in the morning sunlight, and for a moment, Delilah allowed herself to believe that love might be enough to overcome the obstacles in their path. But she knew that the real test was still to come. That test arrived 3 days later. Delilah was helping her father at the feed store when Richard Jennings walked in, flanked by 2 of his ranch hands. He was a tall man, running to fat around the middle, with thinning hair and small, mean eyes. He wore expensive clothes and carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. Daniel, he said, ignoring Delilah completely, I am here to settle our business. I was not aware we had any business to settle, Richard, Daniel said carefully, coming around from behind the counter. Oh, I think you know what I am talking about. I made your daughter an honorable offer of courtship and she rejected me. That is insulting enough. But now, I hear she is carrying on with some worthless drifter who works for Samuel Morrison. Jennings' voice rose. I will not be made a fool of in my own town. My daughter is free to associate with whomever she chooses, Daniel said, his voice steady despite the tension Delilah could see in his shoulders. And Mr. Weston is a respectable young man who has done nothing to deserve your insults. Respectable, Jennings laughed, an ugly sound. He is nobody, he has nothing, and yet your daughter prefers him to me. That is unacceptable. What is unacceptable is you coming into my store and making demands, Daniel said, his patience clearly wearing thin. I think you should leave, Richard. Jennings' face flushed dark red. You are making a mistake, Newsome. A big mistake. You think your little store can survive without my business, without my influence in this town. If that is the price of my daughter's happiness and safety, then yes, I think it can, Daniel replied. Now please leave before I have to ask you more forcefully. For a moment, Delilah thought Jennings might actually strike her father. The 2 ranch hands moved forward slightly, and she grabbed a shovel that was leaning against the wall, ready to defend them both if necessary. But Jennings seemed to regain control of himself, though his expression remained venomous. You will regret this, he said quietly. All of you will regret this. He turned and stalked out of the store, his men following. Daniel sagged against the counter after they left, his face pale. That did not go well. "Father, I am so sorry," Delilah said, her voice shaking. "This is all my fault." "No," Daniel said firmly. "This is Richard Jennings' fault for being a bully and a coward who cannot accept rejection with grace. You have done nothing wrong, Delilah. Nothing." But Delilah could not shake the feeling of dread that settled over her like a shroud. Jennings was not the type of man to make empty threats. He would retaliate, and she feared what form that retaliation might take. She did not have to wait long to find out. 2 nights later, a fire broke out in the barn behind their house. Fortunately, Thomas saw the flames from his bedroom window and raised the alarm quickly enough that they managed to save the structure and the animals inside. But there was no doubt in anyone's mind that the fire had been deliberately set. "I found this near the barn," Daniel said grimly, holding up a piece of cloth that bore the Jennings Ranch brand. "He is not even trying to hide his involvement." "We need to go to the sheriff," Catherine said, her face white with fear. "The sheriff works for Jennings, you know that," Daniel replied. "He will claim this cloth could have come from anywhere, that there is no proof of who set the fire. We are on our own." That night, Travis showed up at their door with Samuel Morrison. The older rancher was a grizzled man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Heard about the fire," Samuel said without preamble. "Jennings' work, I am assuming." Daniel nodded. "We believe so, though we cannot prove it." "You do not need to prove it. Everyone in town knows what kind of man he is." Samuel glanced at Travis, then back at Daniel. "I have a proposition for you. Bring your family to stay at my ranch for a while. I have plenty of room, and more importantly, I have men who can help protect you. Jennings would not dare try anything on my property." "I cannot ask you to put yourself at risk for us," Daniel protested. "You are not asking. I am offering." Samuel's expression was stern. "I have known you for 20 years, Daniel Newsome. You are a good man, and your family does not deserve to be terrorized by a spoiled bully. Besides, I owe Jennings a few licks for the times he has tried to undercut my cattle prices and poach my workers. This gives me an excuse to stand against him publicly." After some discussion, Daniel agreed. The family packed what they needed and moved to the Morrison Ranch the next day. It was a sprawling property with a large main house, several outbuildings, and beautiful views of the surrounding mountains. Samuel gave them comfortable rooms and made them feel welcome. For Delilah, being at the ranch meant seeing Travis every day. They took walks together in the evening after the work was done, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride astride instead of side saddle, which scandalized her mother but gave Delilah a thrilling sense of freedom. She helped the ranch cook with meals and discovered that Travis had not been exaggerating about his sisters. He received letters from them regularly and read parts of them aloud to her, laughing at their various antics and adventures. "They would love you," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "My mother, too. She always said I needed to find a woman who would not let me get away with being lazy or careless." "I am not sure I would describe you as either of those things," Delilah said, leaning against his shoulder. "You are one of the hardest working people I have ever met." "That is because I have proper motivation now," Travis said, kissing the top of her head. "I want to build something here, Delilah, a life, a future, with you if you will have me." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Delilah's heart pounded. "Not yet. I want to do it properly when the time is right." Travis tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. "But I am telling you my intentions. I love you, Delilah Newsome. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and I promise you that I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe and make you happy." "I love you too," Delilah whispered, and they sealed the promise with a kiss that made her forget about Richard Jennings and his threats, at least for a little while. But reality had a way of intruding. A week after the Newsome family moved to the Morrison Ranch, Jennings made his next move. He filed a legal claim disputing the ownership of a section of Morrison's land, claiming that an old survey had been done incorrectly and that the property actually belonged to the Jennings Ranch. It was a baseless claim, but it would tie up the land in court for months or even years. "He is trying to hurt me financially," Samuel said, reading the legal papers with disgust. "Thinks he can bleed me dry with lawyer fees and court costs." "I am so sorry," Daniel said. "This is happening because of us." "This is happening because Richard Jennings is a vindictive snake," Samuel corrected. "But I am not without resources of my own. I have a good lawyer and the original surveys are solid. He will not win this." Still, the legal battle cast a pall over the ranch. Samuel had to spend time and money defending his property rights, which meant less attention could be paid to the daily operations. Travis and the other ranch hands took on additional responsibilities, working longer hours to keep things running smoothly. Delilah felt helpless and frustrated. She hated being the cause of so much trouble, hated that her simple refusal to marry a man she did not love had spiraled into this bitter conflict. She tried to make herself useful, helping with the cooking and mending and any other tasks she could find, but it felt like putting a bandage on a bullet wound. One afternoon, she was in the kitchen garden picking vegetables when she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she saw Richard Jennings himself riding toward the house, alone this time. Her first instinct was to run inside and alert the others, but something made her stand her ground. "Miss Newsome," Jennings said, dismounting and walking toward her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "What a pleasure to find you here alone. Whatever you have to say, Mr. Jennings, you can say it in front of witnesses," Delilah said, backing toward the house. But Jennings moved quickly for a man of his size, blocking her path. "I think you and I need to have a frank conversation," he said. "Woman to man, without all the posturing and interference from others." "We have nothing to discuss," Delilah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have made my position clear." "Your position is causing a lot of unnecessary trouble," Jennings said. "Your father's business is suffering. Samuel Morrison is being dragged through the courts. And for what? Because you have some romantic notion about marrying for love. Because I will not be bullied into a marriage I do not want," Delilah countered. "You cannot force me to care for you, Mr. Jennings, no matter what threats you make or how much damage you do." "But I can make life very difficult for the people you care about," Jennings said softly. "I can destroy your father's business. I can tie up Morrison's land in legal disputes for years. I can make sure that cowboy of yours never finds work in this territory again. All of that is within my power." "Why?" Delilah asked, genuine confusion mixing with her fear. "Why are you doing this?" "There are plenty of women who would be honored by your attention. Why fixate on me?" "Because you said no," Jennings replied, and for the first time, she saw something almost vulnerable in his expression. "Do you know how few people ever tell me no? How rare it is for someone to look at my money and my position and decide it is not enough?" He laughed bitterly. "My first wife married me for my money and ran off with a traveling salesman. My second wife married me out of duty to her family and died miserable. I thought maybe if I found someone with real spirit, someone who was not afraid of me, it would be different. But you are trying to terrify me into marrying you," Delilah pointed out. "How is that any different from your previous marriages?" Jennings opened his mouth, then closed it again, seeming to actually consider her words. Before he could respond, Travis came around the corner of the house at a run, rifle in hand. "Step away from her," he commanded, his voice hard as iron. "Now." Jennings raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I am simply having a conversation with the lady." The lady does not want to have a conversation with you. I suggest you leave before I forget my manners." Travis positioned himself between Delilah and Jennings, his body tense and ready for violence if necessary. "You think you can protect her?" Jennings asked, lowering his hands. "You think your rifle and your righteous anger are enough to stand against me?" "I think love and loyalty are worth more than all your money and threats," Travis said. "And I think you are about to find out just how many people in this territory are tired of your bullying." Something in Travis's tone must have convinced Jennings that he had pushed as far as he could today. He mounted his horse, looking down at them both with an expression that mixed anger and something that might have been sadness. "This is not over," he said, but it sounded more like a plea than a threat. "Yes, it is," Delilah said, finding her voice. "It is over, Mr. Jennings. I will never marry you. You can make our lives difficult. You can use your money and influence to cause problems, but you cannot change how I feel. And eventually, you will have to accept that and move on." Jennings stared at her for a long moment, then turned his horse and rode away without another word. Travis immediately turned to Delilah, checking her for injuries. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," Delilah assured him, though she was shaking now that the confrontation was over. "He just wanted to talk, to try to convince me to change my mind. He should not have approached you alone. That was calculated intimidation." Travis was still holding the rifle, his knuckles white on the stock. "If anything had happened to you, but it did not," Delilah said, placing her hand over his. "I am safe. We are both safe." They stood there for a moment, both trying to calm their racing hearts. Then Samuel emerged from the barn, having been alerted by one of the hands that Jennings was on the property. "What did he want?" the rancher asked, looking between them. "To threaten us some more," Travis said. "And to try to convince Delilah to marry him through a combination of guilt and intimidation." "That man is getting desperate," Samuel observed, "which makes him dangerous. I think it is time we took this matter to someone with more authority than our local sheriff." "Who did you have in mind?" Delilah asked. "The territorial governor. I served with him during the war, and he owes me a favor or two. If I can convince him to look into Jennings' activities, his threats to local businesses, his suspected involvement in that fire, we might be able to get some real legal protection." Samuel looked thoughtful. "It will take some time to arrange, but it could be worth it." "Thank you," Daniel said, having joined them after hearing about Jennings' visit, "for everything you have done for my family. I do not know how we will ever repay you." "Just invite me to the wedding," Samuel said, glancing at Travis and Delilah with a knowing smile. "That will be payment enough." Over the next several weeks, Samuel worked on reaching out to his contacts in the territorial government. Meanwhile, life on the ranch settled into a routine. The Newsome family made themselves useful, and the ranch hands grew accustomed to having them around. Margaret struck up a friendship with one of the younger cowboys, a shy fellow named Henry who blushed whenever she spoke to him. Thomas learned to rope and ride, soaking up knowledge from anyone willing to teach him, and Delilah and Travis grew closer, their love deepening with each passing day. They talked about their future together, about the ranch they might buy someday, the children they would raise, the life they would build. Travis told her about his dreams of breeding horses, combining his family's Montana stock with the sturdy local animals to create something special. Delilah confessed that she had always wanted to learn to read medicine books, to be able to help people who were sick or injured. "We could do all of that," Travis said one evening as they walked along the fence line, the stars brilliant overhead. "Together, we could do anything." "Do you really believe that?" Delilah asked, leaning into his warmth. "I do. I believe in you, in us, in the future we are going to build." He stopped and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Delilah Newsome, I know I said I would wait for the perfect time, but I am realizing that the perfect time is whenever I am with you. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the mother of my children? Delilah felt tears of joy streaming down her face. Yes, she said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Travis pulled a simple gold ring from his pocket, a delicate band that had belonged to his grandmother. It is not much, he said, slipping it onto her finger, but I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. I could never regret it, Delilah said, kissing him deeply. I love you, Travis Weston. I love everything about you. They announced their engagement that night at dinner, to the delight of everyone at the ranch. Catherine had tears in her eyes as she embraced her daughter, and even Daniel looked pleased, though he took Travis aside afterward for what Delilah assumed was a fatherly talk about expectations and responsibilities. He told me he would shoot me if I ever made you cry, Travis reported later, grinning. I told him that was fair. The happiness of their engagement was tempered by the ongoing threat of Richard Jennings, but for a few weeks, things were relatively quiet. Jennings' legal claim on Morrison's land was working its way through the courts, but Samuel's lawyer was confident they would prevail. There were no more fires or direct confrontations, and people began to hope that maybe Jennings had finally given up. Then Samuel received word that the territorial governor would be passing through the area on his way to Salt Lake City, and had agreed to meet with him. It was the opportunity they had been waiting for, a chance to bring official attention to Jennings' behavior and hopefully put a stop to it once and for all. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the governor's hotel in a nearby town called Brigham. Samuel, Daniel, and Travis rode out early that morning, leaving the ranch under the supervision of Samuel's most trusted foreman. Delilah wanted to go with them, but Travis convinced her to stay behind where it was safe. I will be back before dinner, he promised, kissing her goodbye. And hopefully with good news that will let us start planning our wedding without looking over our shoulders. Delilah watched him ride away, a knot of anxiety in her stomach that she could not quite explain. She tried to distract herself with chores, helping the cook prepare bread and tending to the kitchen garden. Margaret kept her company, chattering about Henry and whether he might work up the courage to ask her to the church social coming up next month. Around noon, a rider came galloping up to the ranch, his horse lathered with sweat. It was one of the hands who had accompanied Travis and the others to Brigham. There has been trouble, he gasped, dismounting quickly. Jennings and his men were waiting on the road. There was a confrontation. Delilah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. What kind of confrontation? Are they all right? Mr. Morrison and Mr. Newsome are fine. But Travis took a bullet. He is alive, but he is hurt bad. They are bringing him back now in a wagon. The next hour was the longest of Delilah's life. She paced the porch, unable to sit still, while Catherine tried to comfort her and Margaret hovered nearby looking frightened. Finally, she saw the wagon approaching, Daniel driving while Samuel rode alongside on horseback. Travis was lying in the back of the wagon, his face pale and his shirt soaked with blood. Delilah scrambled up beside him, taking his hand. I am here, she said, fighting back tears. I am right here, Travis. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. Sorry, he whispered. Promised I would be back for dinner. Hush, Delilah said, stroking his forehead. Do not try to talk. We need to get you inside and tend to that wound. They carried him into the house and laid him on Samuel's bed. The ranch cook, who had some experience with bullet wounds, helped Delilah remove Travis's shirt and examine the injury. The bullet had entered his left shoulder, missing the lung but doing significant damage to the muscle and possibly nicking a bone. "We need to get the bullet out," the cook said grimly. "And we need to do it soon before infection sets in." They sent someone to fetch the nearest doctor, but he was 2 hours away. The cook did not think they could wait that long. "I have done this before," she told Delilah. "But my hands shake now that I am older. If you can hold him steady and follow my instructions, we can do this." "Tell me what to do," Delilah said without hesitation. The next hour was a nightmare of blood and pain. Travis bore it stoically, gritting his teeth and sometimes passing out from the agony as Delilah worked to extract the bullet under the cook's guidance. When it was finally out and the wound cleaned and bandaged, Delilah collapsed in a chair beside the bed, exhausted and terrified. Travis slept fitfully, his skin hot with fever. Delilah bathed his face with cool water and whispered prayers and promises, begging him to hold on, to fight, to come back to her. Catherine brought her tea and food, but she could not eat. Margaret sat with her sometimes, just being there so she would not be alone. On the second day, the doctor finally arrived and examined Travis. "You did good work," he told Delilah. "The wound is clean, and I do not see signs of serious infection yet. Whether he recovers now depends on his own strength and constitution." "He is strong," Delilah said fiercely. "He will make it." And slowly, painfully, he did. The fever broke on the third day, and Travis woke up clear-headed for the first time since being shot. He looked at Delilah, who had barely left his side, and managed a weak smile. "You look terrible," he said, his voice hoarse. Delilah laughed through her tears. "You are one to talk. You have been shot. I noticed." He tried to shift position and winced. "What happened?" "I remember Jennings and his men blocking the road, remember drawing my gun, and then everything went dark." "You were shot protecting my father," Daniel said from the doorway. "Jennings was going to shoot me, and you pushed me out of the way and took the bullet yourself." Travis looked confused. "I do not remember that part." "Well, I remember it," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life, son. I will never forget that." Over the next few days, as Travis slowly regained his strength, the full story of what had happened on the road to Brigham emerged. Richard Jennings, desperate and unhinged, had learned about the meeting with the territorial governor and decided to take drastic action. He and several of his men had ambushed the group on the road, intending to intimidate them into canceling the meeting. "He had a gun pointed at Daniel," Samuel explained. "Said he would kill him if we did not turn around and forget about talking to the governor." Travis drew his weapon and Jennings shot him, but the gunfire attracted attention from a cavalry patrol that happened to be in the area. Jennings and his men fled, but not before the soldiers got a good look at them. "So, what happens now?" Delilah asked. "Now the territorial governor is very interested in Richard Jennings and his activities. The cavalry patrol confirmed that Jennings and his men were armed and threatening citizens. Combined with Samuel's testimony about the legal harassment and the evidence of the fire, there is enough to bring charges." Daniel looked satisfied. "Jennings is in serious legal trouble, and his days of terrorizing this town are over." True to Daniel's prediction, Richard Jennings was arrested a week later on charges of attempted murder, arson, and various other crimes. His ranch was seized as part of the legal proceedings, and Jennings himself was transported to the territorial capital to stand trial. Without his money and influence to protect him, the truth about his past came to light, including strong evidence that he had killed his second wife. The trial was swift and decisive. Richard Jennings was sentenced to 20 years in prison, effectively ending his reign of terror over Kelton and the surrounding area. The news was met with relief and celebration throughout the town. People who had been too afraid to speak out against him, before now shared their stories of intimidation and abuse. "It is over," Travis said one evening, as he and Delilah sat on the porch of the Morrison ranch. His shoulder was healing well, though he still wore a sling and would for several more weeks. "We can finally move forward with our lives." "I still cannot quite believe it," Delilah admitted. "For so long, Jennings felt like this dark cloud hanging over everything. Now that he is gone, it almost feels too good to be true." "It is true, and we have a wedding to plan." Travis kissed her gently. "That is, if you still want to marry a cowboy with a bum shoulder and no ranch of his own." "I want to marry you exactly as you are," Delilah said firmly. Injured shoulder and all. They were married on a beautiful September morning in the small church in Kelton. Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her taller frame, and carried wildflowers that Margaret had picked that morning. Travis wore a new suit that Samuel had insisted on buying for him, and looked so handsome that Delilah's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. The church was packed with well-wishers. Mr. Henderson was there, beaming with pride. The ranch hands from Morrison's spread filled several pews. Even some people who had been too afraid to oppose Jennings publicly before came to celebrate the marriage and show their support. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, and Delilah felt tears of joy sliding down her face. This was really happening. She was marrying the man she loved, the man who had risked his life for her family, the man who saw her stubborn fire as something to be admired rather than suppressed. When they exchanged vows, Travis's voice was strong and clear. "I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you through whatever challenges life brings. I promise to never try to change who you are, because the woman you are is the woman I fell in love with." Delilah's voice shook with emotion. "I promise to love you, support you, and build a life with you that honors both our dreams. I promise to be your partner in all things, in good times and in difficult times from this day forward." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. Travis kissed her thoroughly, to the delight of the congregation, and Delilah felt happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. The reception was held at the Morrison Ranch, with tables of food and music and dancing. Samuel gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. Daniel welcomed Travis into the family officially. Even Catherine admitted that maybe she had been wrong about Travis's prospects. "He is a good man," she told Delilah. "And more importantly, he loves you for exactly who you are. That is worth more than money or status." As the sun set and the party continued, Travis and Delilah slipped away to be alone for a few moments. They walked to their favorite spot by the fence line, looking out at the mountains painted gold and purple by the dying light. "So, Mrs. Weston," Travis said, pulling her close with his good arm. "How does it feel to be married to a stubborn cowboy?" "Wonderful," Delilah said, resting her head on his shoulder. "How does it feel to be married to a woman everyone said was too stubborn to wed?" "Like I am the luckiest man alive," Travis replied, kissing the top of her head. "Because your fire, your strength, your refusal to be anything other than yourself, that is what I love most about you. I would not change a single thing." They stayed there until the stars came out, talking about their future and the life they would build together. Samuel had offered to sell them a portion of his land at a very reasonable price, where they could build their own ranch and raise horses like Travis dreamed of doing. With the money Delilah's father had given them as a wedding gift and Travis's savings, they had enough to make a start. "It will not be easy," Travis warned. "Building a ranch from the ground up is hard work." "I have never been afraid of hard work," Delilah said, "and I have never been afraid of challenges, not when I am facing them with you." The first year of their marriage was indeed hard work, but it was also filled with joy and love. They built a small house on their new land, just 2 rooms to start with, but with plans to expand as their family grew. They bought their first breeding stock, carefully selected horses that Travis believed would produce exceptional offspring. Delilah planted a garden and learned everything she could about veterinary medicine from the books Travis bought for her. Some people in town still gossiped about the independent woman who had refused to marry Richard Jennings and the drifter Cowboy who had won her heart. But most people came to respect and admire the young couple who worked so hard and loved each other so obviously. On their first anniversary, Delilah told Travis she was pregnant. He whooped with joy and spun her around carefully, mindful of her condition. Their first child, a son they named James Daniel, was born the following spring. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's easy smile, and both parents doted on him shamelessly. "He is going to be as stubborn as his mother," Travis predicted, watching the baby grip his finger with surprising strength. "And as kind as his father," Delilah countered, watching her husband cradle their son with infinite gentleness. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Catherine Margaret, after both grandmothers. She was followed by another son, Samuel Thomas, named for the man who had protected them when they needed it most, and Delilah's younger brother. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the ranch prospered as Travis's skill with horses became known throughout the territory. Delilah became the person people came to when their animals were sick or injured, her knowledge and gentle touch saving countless horses and cattle over the years. She also helped human neighbors when they needed it, delivering babies and treating illnesses. Travis supported her work completely, often caring for their children while she was called away to help someone in need. "You were right," he told her one evening as they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. James was teaching his younger siblings to rope a fence post with mixed results. "Together, we really can do anything." "We have been blessed," Delilah agreed, leaning against his shoulder. His injured shoulder had healed completely over the years, though it ached sometimes when the weather changed. "But we have also worked hard for what we have." "The best things in life require both," Travis said. "Hard work and good fortune, love and commitment, fire and patience." Delilah laughed. "Fire and patience. Is that what our marriage is built on, among other things?" Travis kissed her, slow and sweet and full of the love that had only grown stronger over the years. "But I still say the fire is my favorite part, that spirit of yours that refuses to be tamed or suppressed. That is what makes you who you are." As the years passed, their family and their ranch continued to grow. They added more children to their brood, eventually totaling 6 in all. The Weston horses became famous throughout Utah and beyond, prized for their intelligence, strength, and gentle temperament. Delilah's medical skills were recognized when a doctor from Salt Lake City visited and offered to sponsor her in formal medical training, but she declined, content with the life she had built. "I do not need official credentials to do the work that matters to me," she explained to Travis. "I have everything I need right here." Daniel and Catherine eventually sold the feed store and moved to a small house on the Weston Ranch, where they could be close to their grandchildren. Margaret married Henry, the shy cowboy she had befriended during their time at the Morrison Ranch, and they settled nearby. Thomas grew up to become a lawyer, using his skills to help people who could not afford expensive legal representation. Samuel Morrison remained a close friend until his death at the age of 78. He left a portion of his ranch to Travis and Delilah in his will, along with a letter expressing his pride in how they had built their life together, and his gratitude for the joy they had brought to his final years. "He was like a father to me," Travis said, tears streaming down his face as he read the letter. "Especially after my own father and I parted on such difficult terms." "He loved you like a son," Delilah assured him, holding him close, "and he was so proud of the man you became." One piece of unfinished business from Travis's past was finally resolved when he was 40 years old. He received a letter from his youngest sister, now married and living in Montana, begging him to come home. Their father was dying and wanted to see Travis one last time to make amends. "I have to go," Travis told Delilah. "I cannot let him die with this breach between us." "Then we will all go," Delilah said firmly. "You will introduce our children to their grandfather, and we will be there to support you." The trip to Montana was long and difficult but worth it. Travis's father, weakened by illness but still sharp-minded, wept when he saw his son and the family he had built. "I was wrong," the old man said, gripping Travis's hand. "Wrong to try to force you into a life you did not want. You have built something good here, something better than what I tried to give you. I am proud of you, son. I should have said that years ago." "I love you, father," Travis said, his voice breaking. "I never stopped loving you even when we were apart." They spent 2 weeks in Montana, giving Travis's father a chance to know his grandchildren and reconnect with his son. When the old man passed away peacefully in his sleep, Travis mourned but also felt a sense of peace and closure that had been missing for years. "Family is complicated," he told Delilah on the journey back to Utah. "But it is also precious. I am glad I had the chance to make things right with him before the end." "So am I," Delilah said, holding his hand. "Our children should know where they come from, the good and the difficult parts both. It helps them understand who they are." As their children grew into adults, each found their own path. James took over the horse breeding operation, expanding it even further. Catherine became a teacher, sharing her love of learning with the next generation. Samuel surprised everyone by becoming a doctor, inspired by watching his mother care for the sick and injured over the years. The younger children pursued their own dreams, supported always by parents who believed that everyone should follow their own path. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Travis and Delilah sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Their hair was graying now, their faces lined with years of laughter and hard work, but their love was as strong as ever. "Do you ever regret it?" Travis asked. "Marrying a cowboy with nothing but a horse and a dream?" "Not for a single moment," Delilah said firmly. "You gave me a life of love, partnership, and freedom to be myself. What more could anyone ask for?" "I admired a woman with fire," Travis said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago in Mr. Henderson's general store. "And I got to spend my life with her. I am the fortunate one." "We are both fortunate," Delilah corrected, kissing him softly. "Because we found each other and had the courage to fight for our love, even when it was difficult." They sat together as the stars began to emerge, comfortable in the silence that comes from knowing someone completely and loving them anyway. Around them, the ranch they had built together hummed with life. Horses whinnied in the pastures, their children and grandchildren's voices drifted from the main barn where a family dinner was being prepared, and the wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. "Tell me again," Travis said, pulling her closer. "Tell me about the day we met." Delilah smiled, settling into the familiar story. "A bullet shattered the window of the general store, and instead of screaming like any sensible woman would have done, I grabbed a can of peaches and threw it at the fool who had fired his gun. And then this handsome cowboy with the bluest eyes I had ever seen stepped between us and said." "I admire a woman with fire," Travis finished, his eyes twinkling. "And I thought to myself, Who is this stranger who sees my anger as something admirable instead of shameful? Who is this man who does not want me to be quiet and meek and invisible? Delilah's voice grew soft with memory and love. I did not know it then, but I was already falling in love with you. I knew it, Travis confessed. I knew the moment I saw you standing there, fierce and fearless and absolutely beautiful, that you were going to change my life. We changed each other's lives, Delilah said. We built something together that neither of us could have built alone. As the night deepened and the family gathered for dinner, Travis and Delilah joined them, surrounded by the children and grandchildren who were their legacy. The table was loud and chaotic, filled with laughter and arguments and the kind of love that only comes from family who truly know and accept each other. Later, as they prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 3 decades, Travis held Delilah close and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked, though she thought she knew. "For being stubborn enough to refuse to settle for less than you deserved. For having the fire to stand up to people who tried to control you. For choosing me and building this life with me." Travis kissed her forehead. "For everything." "Thank you for seeing my stubbornness as strength," Delilah replied. "For admiring my fire instead of trying to extinguish it. For being my partner in all things. For loving me exactly as I am." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had done thousands of nights before and would do thousands of nights more. Outside, the ranch slept under a blanket of stars, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. The story of the stubborn woman who refused to wed and the cowboy who admired her fire became part of local legend, told and retold around campfires and dinner tables throughout Utah. But for Travis and Delilah, it was simply their life, their love story, the journey they had taken together from that first explosive meeting to this comfortable, joy-filled present. Years later, when they were both old and their children were raising grandchildren of their own, Delilah would still sometimes throw things when she got angry, though her aim was not quite what it used to be. And Travis would still grin at her with that same admiring expression he had worn in Mr. Henderson's store all those decades ago. "You still have that fire," he would say, and she would laugh and tell him he was a foolish old man, but they both knew the truth. The fire had never gone out, and the love it had kindled had only grown stronger and brighter over the years, warming not just the two of them but everyone lucky enough to be part of their family. When Delilah was 75, she was called to help deliver a baby for a young woman in town. It was a difficult birth, and Delilah worked through the night to ensure both mother and child survived. When she finally returned home at dawn, exhausted but triumphant, Travis was waiting on the porch with a cup of hot coffee and a warm blanket. "You are going to work yourself to death," he scolded gently, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. "There was a baby who needed to be born and a mother who needed help," Delilah said simply. "What else could I do? You could have sent someone else. You are not as young as you used to be." "Neither are you, but I do not see you slowing down with those horses," Delilah pointed out. Travis laughed and pulled her close. "We are a stubborn pair, are we not? Too stubborn to know when to quit. Too stubborn to give up on the things that matter," Delilah corrected. "There is a difference." They sat together on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains they had called home for more than 50 years. Their children worried that they worked too hard, that they should retire and let the younger generation take over completely. But neither Travis nor Delilah could imagine a life without purpose, without the work that gave their days meaning. "We have built a good life," Travis said eventually. "A life worth living, worth fighting for." "We have," Delilah agreed. "And it all started because I threw a can of peaches and you did not run away." "Best decision I ever made," Travis said. "Not running away from you." Best decision I ever made was letting you stay, Delilah replied, and they sat in comfortable silence as the world woke around them. They lived to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 6 children, 19 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren. The party was held at the ranch, with people coming from all over the territory to honor the couple who had become legends in their own time. Speech. Someone called and Travis stood, pulling Delilah up beside him. "I am not much for speeches," he began, his voice still strong despite his 86 years. "But I want to say this. 60 years ago, I met a woman who everyone said was too stubborn to wed. Her family despaired of her, and society frowned on her independent ways. But I looked at her and saw someone extraordinary, someone with fire and passion and courage. And I thought to myself, that is the kind of woman worth building a life with." He turned to Delilah, his eyes still as blue and full of love as they had been that first day. "You have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest adventure. You challenged me, supported me, and loved me through everything life threw at us, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." There was not a dry eye in the crowd as Delilah stood on her tiptoes to kiss her husband. "And I would still throw that can of peaches," she said, making everyone laugh through their tears. Travis Weston passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later at the age of 88. He died as he had lived, surrounded by family and love, in the house he had built with his own hands on the land he and Delilah had claimed together. Delilah held his hand as he slipped away, whispering all the promises they had made to each other over the years. "Until we meet again," she said, kissing his forehead one last time. She followed him 6 months later, her heart simply giving out one morning as she sat in her favorite chair on the porch, looking at the mountains they had loved together. Her children found her there, a peaceful expression on her face and a letter to Travis clutched in her hand. The letter was read at her funeral and then placed in her coffin with her, so she could carry it with her to wherever she was going. It said simply, "My dearest Travis, my stubborn cowboy who admired a woman with fire. Thank you for every moment, every adventure, every laugh, and every tear. Thank you for seeing me when others looked away, for loving me when others thought I was too difficult to love. You were my partner, my love, my everything. Wait for me on the other side. I will find you, just as I found you in that dusty Utah town so many years ago. Your fire burns eternal. All my love, always and forever, your Delilah." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a stone that read simply, "Travis and Delilah Weston, partners in life and love. Their fire lit the way." The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their children and grandchildren, a testament to the foundation Travis and Delilah had laid. The Weston horses remained prized throughout the West, and the family continued to be known for their integrity, hard work, and fierce independence. Every year on their anniversary, the family gathered at their graves to remember and celebrate the love story that had started it all. Children who had never met Travis and Delilah heard the stories passed down through the generations. About the can of peaches, about Richard Jennings and the fight for freedom, about the cowboy who had admired a woman with fire and the stubborn woman who had finally found someone worthy of her love. The story became part of the family's identity, a reminder that true love requires courage, that fighting for what is right is always worth it, and that the best relationships are built on mutual respect, admiration, and the freedom to be yourself. In the little church in Kelton, there is a stained glass window donated by the Weston family. It shows a mountain sunrise, symbolizing new beginnings and hope. Underneath is a small plaque that reads, "In memory of Travis and Delilah Weston, who taught us that love is worth fighting for and that stubbornness can be a virtue when paired with courage and kindness. And on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right across the ranch, the older residents of Kelton swear they can sometimes hear laughter echoing across the hills, the sound of a man and a woman who loved each other fiercely and built something lasting from that love. Their story lived on not just in the memories of their descendants, but in the very fabric of the community they had helped build. Kelton grew and changed over the decades, but the values Travis and Delilah had embodied, integrity, independence, the courage to stand up for what is right, remained at its core. The general store where they first met was eventually torn down and replaced with a more modern building, but the new owners hung a painting above the counter showing the original store with a caption that read, "Where the Weston love story began." Mr. Henderson's great-grandson, who inherited the family business, kept a can of peaches on permanent display, claiming it was a descendant of the famous can Delilah had thrown, though everyone knew that was impossible. The Morrison Ranch, which had provided sanctuary when they needed it most, was eventually absorbed into the Weston holdings, the two families having intermarried over the generations. Samuel Morrison's memory was honored with a scholarship fund that sent local young people to college, ensuring that his legacy of generosity and protection lived on. Even Richard Jennings, the villain of the story, became a cautionary tale told to young people about the dangers of using power and money to control others. His ranch, sold off after his conviction, became a cooperative owned by several local families, a symbol of community over individual greed. The love story of Travis and Delilah Weston proved that even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, kindness could triumph over cruelty, love could overcome fear, and two stubborn people who refused to compromise their values could build something beautiful together. And so their story ended, not with a tragic goodbye but with a legacy that would last for generations. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask from a life well lived? In the end, perhaps the moral of their story was this: that being too stubborn to settle for less than you deserve is not a flaw but a strength, that fire and passion should be admired and nurtured rather than suppressed, and that the best love stories are built not on compromise but on mutual respect and acceptance of each other's true nature. Travis had admired a woman with fire, and Delilah had found a man who celebrated her strength rather than fearing it. Together, they had proved that the right kind of stubbornness, paired with love and dedication, could move mountains, build empires, and create a legacy that would last forever. Their descendants still ranch that same land in Utah, still breed horses with the Weston name, still tell the story of how it all began with a can of peaches and a cowboy's grin. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Travis and Delilah are together still, their fire burning eternal, their love undiminished by something as minor as death. The end of their earthly story was simply the beginning of their eternal one, and that is the best kind of happily ever after there is.